Hello and welcome back to the Teacher Experience podcast. As always, we are delighted to have you here. Before we start, just a reminder, please do go and follow us on Spotify, Amazon and YouTube. We've got some really exciting discounts that we can offer you. So we are Teacher Card ambassadors and they work with local discounts near you, so local companies, local businesses, and get you the best teacher discounts that they can. Now you can sign up with them using our discount code TC15TE for 15% off. Now, we are also brand partners with TidyThink, who make the most incredible planners and notebooks. So this is one example of the notebook. I use this every day, and I also use my teacher planner every day, which I absolutely love. Now, you can get £5 off with those using the code T. Welcome to the Teacher Experience. Today we are talking with Ben, who has a wealth of experience in education, from teaching science in London to working internationally, and now as a programme delivery manager at Teach First. We'll be diving into his journey and insights, so let's get started. So hello Ben, to kick things off, could you share with us your what went well and your even better if for this week, please?
Yes, of course. Yeah. Hi. Pleasure to be here. And thank you for inviting me on, first of all. I kind of half expected you to do like an off-menu poppadoms or bread opening then. But yeah, I'll go with what went well to begin with. So for me, actually, ironically, it's where we met, Naomi. So we've got a hub networking day tomorrow for
Amazing.
Autumn Institute trainees. So I'm traveling up to Birmingham tomorrow morning, very early. And we've got about 140 trainees who are coming towards the end of Autumn Institute, which is the kind of one of our training kind of programs for Teach First. It's going to be an awesome day. We've got lots of trainees coming together to connect and be there in person and kind of hear from a range of different people. So it should be a great day. So that's like it's almost a kind of in the future what went well. I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, absolutely. I loved them when I was doing the Teach First program, and obviously we met through one of the networking opportunities at Teach First as well. And I just think they are so beneficial for all of the trainees because they actually get to talk to people that are in exactly the same boat as them and sort of have that opportunity to go, well, this is what's working well for me. This isn't what's working well with me. How are you managing it? It's not only an opportunity for them to talk about teaching, it's also an opportunity for them to sort of have that time to offload and talk about everything that's going on within their world. I really like those days and I hope they go really well for you. And what would you say your even better if is for this week?
My EBI this week sounds really mundane, but it's just trying to keep on top of my emails. I don't know if other people find this, but when I was in school, that was always a bugbear for me. It's just the sheer number of emails. And I try and finish the week with a clear inbox. But yeah, last week, it was just messy. Loads of emails left over and just flags to follow up with on Monday. But yeah, so a kind of small thing, but something that when you're going away on the weekend, you think about, I've got all those emails to deal with on Monday morning. So that's probably my EBI, is to try and get on top of emails this week. Yes.
Absolutely. I hear you with that one. As I said before we started recording, I had a really busy weekend and I left Friday having cleared the inbox, and I got in this morning not having a huge amount of time to do emails, and it got to break and I had 30 emails on the inbox. And I was like, why is there already 30? But I had to clear them. I am that person
over the weekend.
Has to clear emails.
Yeah, I'm the same. So that was first on my list this morning, but hopefully I can do better. Must do better this week.
I always find it really helpful to just put a time of day where that's the point where I go through my emails and it's non-negotiable. It has to get done, even if I just star most of them.
Yeah, definitely. I think something that I've learned, and I don't know if this is a tip for anyone, like if you're new going into teaching, but certainly like dealing with those ones that you can deal with quickly there and then starring those ones that either need delegating or you need to spend longer on for a time of the day later on, and then deleting those obviously straight away that you can delete and that don't matter. So I think it was the 3 Ds. It was like do, delegate, and delete or something. I didn't coin that.
Ooh, I like that. Do, delegate, and delete.
Yes.
Oh, I've never heard that, but I'm going to use it. That's brilliant.
You heard it here first.
Okay, awesome. So moving on then, you started your teaching journey with on the Teach First programme, as we have just touched on, and you started that in North London. So I guess what we'd like to know, and I'm sure our listeners would like to know, is what initially inspired you to go down not just teaching, but the Teach First route, and how did that experience shape your early teaching career?
Yeah, so I think I did a biology degree at Leeds Uni, and honestly, in full transparency, hadn't thought about teaching. And I think that's the case for a lot of people going into teaching, whether it's through Teach First or elsewhere. But yeah, got to the end of my third year, didn't really know what to do, so I then got a job working on the student exec for a year, which was like, I think I was trying to cling on to university for as long as possible. But that was in an education role, and I loved uni, I loved school, and although I hadn't thought about teaching kind of especially, I heard somebody talking about Teach First, and at the time it was, I hadn't heard of them, but I found out that you could get paid straight away, that you were working with children, which I enjoyed. I'd done some like tuition and stuff like that. I was super passionate about my subject, so I loved biology, really enjoyed my degree, but didn't really want to go into research or anything like that. Wanted something more practical. And you gained a qualification. So thinking now about like why Teach First, obviously you gain a qualification in the first year, you get a PGCE, but you also get paid. And I think that at the time was, coming out of uni was pretty appealing. And then obviously like the school holidays. So I was like, okay, this sounds great. So yeah, I think it kind of all came together really. I kind of realised, like reflecting on university and school, that I had a real interest in education, and I really placed a lot of importance and value on it. And I enjoyed my time in school. I loved working with people and children. So I think it started to seem like an obvious choice. And Teach First, I mean, like I said, definitely getting paid, definitely getting the qualification, but also became quite bought in from the outset with their mission and their values. And, as someone who went to a state school but had friends who went to private schools, I think I just really, I loved school, and I think I was really just inspired, I think, by the Teach First mission and their values. And ultimately, in terms of like how that set me up for my career, my whole career has been like based around Teach First. Obviously, I was teaching for about 8 or 9 years, and now I work for Teach First. I think it's set me up for everything. And actually, not just in my professional life, but in my personal life, I met my wife on Teach First at Summer Institute, and 2 of my ushers at my wedding were also housemates at Teach First.
Oh, fantastic.
Yeah, I've got a lot to thank them for, really. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So yeah, that's how I kind of got into it, really.
Yeah, that's absolutely brilliant. I think I really resonate with everything you've just said. I went straight from uni into Teach First, but I know so many people sort of joined for the same reason. It's that Teach First seems really cool, but you get paid, you get a qualification, and as someone that's just finished uni, it seems inviting. But actually, when you get into the depths of sort of researching Teach First, when you're really going for the interviews and you're going through the whole process, you really do just buy into their mission, and the fact that actually you really sort of reflect on your own educational journey, and you reflect on the fact that actually every single child in this country deserves an education, and they all deserve it to be equal, because they all deserve the same opportunities regardless of their background, and regardless where they grow up and their socio-economic status, etc., etc. So I think I'm completely with you. Once you start researching it, you buy in. And I know so many Teach First ambassadors just through working in different schools, let alone the ones that I trained with, and coming obviously to ambassador events, etc. And you can't help but just love the mission, love the values, and always wanting to stay with the vision of Teach First. So I completely understand. And yes, it's great that you sign up to Teach First, you get paid straight away. You've got fantastic support, and I will vouch for that again and again and again. And obviously school holidays is always a win, right?
Well, that's when you're leaving uni, you're like, oh, how am I gonna live without the holidays? That's always a win. But yeah, you're totally right. And I think the other thing to say there is once I started, I don't know if you felt this as well, I'm sure you did, but like once I started in school, then I felt like I realised that kind of state schools in general, and particularly maybe those that are serving disadvantaged communities, they get a lot of bad press. And actually, there's a lot of like myths, I guess, like about around the kids or around behaviour. And actually, you get in there, and the kids are amazing,
Oh,
and
brilliant.
like, just the best part of the job. So I just felt really like, G'd up by that, and it was a tough 2 years. It's always going to be tough, but super rewarding, and had a great school. Kids were great. So yeah,
absolutely. I think at the end of the day, these kids just want consistency. And when they get it, and you turn up every day and you show them that you are there for them, they buy into you, and they want to be in your
completely.
class because they trust you. They want to be in front of you. So
Yeah.
absolutely. And I think we've done a classic Teach First mantra, and we've just spoken about Teach First the whole time. So let's get back to you. So after London, you transitioned to teaching at an international school in Malaysia. How did you find that shift, not only in terms of culture, but also in different teaching methods, thinking about sort of key differences, similarities, like between the UK and Malaysia?
Yeah. I mean, there's the obvious ones, aren't there? Like in terms of culture, like the heat. I'm a redhead and I've got fairly pale skin. So the factor 50 did make an appearance. But I mean, it was amazing. I have to say, like, I really recommend it. I think it was a great experience, and I'll kind of come on to maybe a bit more why. But yeah, I mean, in terms of like the positives, I mean, obviously you're living and working in a new country. You've got a new country to explore. The food is amazing, and again, obviously, being an international school, being a teacher, you get great school holidays. There's loads of opportunities to travel. It's relatively easy to travel. So Malaysia itself was brilliant. Beautiful country, amazing people, great food. Obviously, a bit of a culture change, like language barrier. I think one of the kind of caveats of that, obviously, is that, well, maybe not obviously, but you're joining effectively like an expat community.
Mm-hmm.
So you are in a bubble, and I think like that's something you notice very clearly. And like my wife and I certainly noticed that you do miss family and friends, and we missed England as well. We missed the seasons. You don't get seasons. So simple stuff like that you definitely miss. But in terms of the school, I mean, I don't know yet. I can go into maybe some differences similar about the school if you like as well.
Yeah, what is the difference between the education systems, I suppose, either on a large scale or just how lessons work differently?
So the school I was in was like an international school. So again, it wasn't like a kind of local, Malaysian school. So it was all taught in English, but teachers from around the world, pupils from around the world, which again is obviously really exciting. The staff coming from Japan or America or Australia, New Zealand, Europe, loads of different places. So that's really exciting. I guess one thing to like, be completely clear about is that it's private. So international schools are, I believe, on the most part, private,
Mm-hmm.
which obviously goes against what I was saying earlier about going into Teach First. And I think, that's also really important to just like be upfront and honest about. So yeah, for those 2 years, I definitely chose to, I guess, do something different, do something completely different. Like an opportunity came up and I was like, yes, this is probably once in a lifetime for like my
I
own
think
personal
you
as well
do
as
need to
professional.
absolutely, you need to take those opportunities though, don't you? And now you're in a really fortunate position that you've experienced both, well, an international private and working in state schools. So you have that depth of knowledge, you have that depth of understanding, so that when you are in either of those circumstances, and now you're obviously looking after trainee teachers, you have that experience and you can draw on those expertise.
Yeah,
As much as we're saying
absolutely.
we're strong Teach First ambassadors, of course we are, but if you've worked in private, you can draw on your knowledge of that sector.
100%. And I think there's a lot to learn from that as well. I guess one of the key differences is, on the whole, there was less behavioural challenges, as you might expect, I guess.
Yes.
which is great, and it does save not only stress, but it saves like time, following up with admin and everything. But I'd say like the real bonus of that is that in my third year of teaching, which I was in then, teaching science, so teaching biochem, physics, all the practicals, actually enabled me to really focus on science teaching. and like
Yeah.
experiment with that and really try different practicals. We did like frog dissections. My friend and I, who's another teacher, was like ran something called Jungle Club, where like on every Friday we would go into the jungle and like do kind of nature walks and like ridiculous stuff. So
That is so
and that
cool.
it's really cool, and that obviously like improves your own subject knowledge and subject development. And they taught the IB as well, so again,
Yeah.
that enhanced my subject's knowledge as well.
That's
So
interesting. With the IB, did they teach it all the way through? Did they teach it from year 7 to 13 or whatever the years were?
from memory, I don't think they did. I think they just did IB. Yeah, they did English GCSE curriculum at GCSE, and then
Okay.
IB at sixth form. Yeah.
Awesome. So just for our listeners that don't know what IB is International Baccalaureate. And it's, as far as my knowledge goes, and I have taught it at Key Stage 3 at a previous school, it's more of a holistic view towards teaching methods and learning methods, and students get a lot more chance to explore and to, I suppose, broaden their cultural capital a little bit more with IB, rather than it being very key knowledge content heavy.
Yeah.
It's a bit more explorative.
Yeah.
And research based.
Yeah, I think they go into more depth as well. Like, yeah, research based. They go into more depth. So that was great. I guess the other thing, maybe, just thinking about like differences between maybe here and there. On the whole, they had far greater like access to extracurricular opportunities.
Yeah.
So yeah, sports, music, art was big, and that again is a good experience for someone to go through. So I would recommend that. I'd recommend them also to come home and come back and make a much bigger difference in a school back here. But like, that was a brilliant experience. One thing, actually, maybe a great story, was we had a lot of snakes on the school campus. So I made friends with the security staff. There was like a kind of barrier as you went through, and they had security staff there. And I made friends with the security staff, and I would say to them, like, if you get any snakes, if you catch any snakes, because what they would do is they would get rid of them. I don't know what they do with them, but they would get rid of them. So I said, rather than getting rid of them, bring them to me, bring them to the biology department, and we'll look after them. And we had in the classroom like 3 kind of glass greenhouse things, like pet enclosures. We had like a reticulated python in one of them. We had like a couple of rats in another one, and I mean, we wouldn't keep them for long. We'd get rid of them again, but really cool for like the sixth form students and stuff. So again, you have crazy opportunities like that, which was really cool.
That is
Yeah.
absolutely incredible. I love that. But again, like it's so easy. So easy, but those sort of experiences, again, it's increasing their cultural capital, it's increasing their science capital, just from having real life experiences, real world experiences. This was a snake that we caught from outside.
Yeah. Let's learn about it.
Absolutely, they get to understand sort of what organisms are around them and what's happening in the real world. And what a great way to talk about food chains with having a snake in front of you and some rats.
I know, right? Yeah, it's perfect. It was perfect. We weren't always great at keeping them alive. We did our best, but sometimes the heat got to them. But no, it was brilliant. I mean, there was some, like, in terms of similarities, just going back to like the original question, I'd say as well, because I think there needs to be like a little bit of, when I came back from that job and tried to get a job back in the UK, one of the questions they asked me going into a state school was, I think they thought I had worked on like a kind of as like a TEFL teacher, so teaching English as a foreign language. They hadn't maybe realised that like it was a proper school. So I would say that you work really hard during term time. I'd say like you perhaps even busier, because you also, like, I had to work Saturdays, sometimes worked in the evenings at school, like pastoral care. So I think that's a bit of a myth, is that you are working in a busy environment, perhaps less stressful, but perhaps just as busy. And then things like, some of the same challenges you face with regards to like SEND pupils and EAL pupils and stuff. So yeah, I think those are some of the similarities I can think of.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you've touched on some really, really key points there, and actually sort of touched on some of the crossovers, not necessarily between the UK and Malaysia, but also private schools and state schools. So you
Mm.
spoke a little bit about actually when behaviour is better, as a teacher, you have the opportunity to develop your pedagogy. You have the ability to try out different teaching methods and see what works for you, and see, oh, actually, if I teach this lesson in this way,
Yeah.
then that worked a little bit better. And then when you've got experience in state school and maybe working with those lower ability groups, you have the ability to sort of think, right, I know that worked with a higher group, but if I did this, I know that my lower ability students could access it a little bit easier.
Yeah.
And it's one thing I like to look at when we've got trainee teachers, is sort of thinking, have they, obviously, if you're in a state school, you're only going to get top set, and then you're going to have some really challenging classes as well. But actually, have your trainees got a variety? One, to keep them sane, but
Yeah.
secondly, to develop their ability to teach higher tier and develop their ability to scaffold. So I think you've touched on some really, really, really important points there, and sort of the myth behind private school or maybe grammar schools being easier. Actually, it's just different stresses. It's you take away the behaviour stress, and that is transferred into maybe pastoral roles if you're in private, or actually higher levels of marking and
Or higher
etc.
academic pressures. Yeah,
Yes,
for sure. And I think also my reflection as well is like, you're still teaching children, and like, children are children. Like, I had a year 7 class there who were great. I had a year 7 class when I came back here who I loved. Like, they're children. Like you said earlier, they just want teachers who are passionate, who are consistent, who care, and who want to teach them and like to teach them and know their subject well. So, yeah, I think there's a little bit of that myth busting. Yeah, that's it.
correct. Yeah. Okay, cool. So moving on then. So you took on a leadership role as head of biology and later head of sixth form in a Teach First partner school in West London. Firstly, congratulations, and I take my hat off to you, because both those roles are really big. They're hard. It's a lot of work. But I suppose my question is, what was it like transitioning from so much classroom teaching to being a little bit more inside leadership? Do you have any big challenges or rewards within those roles?
Yeah, it's weird, isn't it? It's like ironic, the thing in teaching, whereas, when you move into a leadership role, you do less of what you're good at and what you've trained to do. So you do less teaching, and you're like then doing more managing and stuff. But maybe that's everywhere. So I think it was really busy, I'd say, is one reflection. Because you are still teaching, and obviously you have all the leadership stuff to do on top of that. I think one thing that maybe I just didn't realize, and maybe this was naive of me, is that like, management was completely new to me. I went straight from uni pretty much into Teach First and into teaching, and so I didn't really know how to like manage people. I didn't know what necessarily good management was like. I knew how to teach and loved that, but didn't really get any training on how to manage people and what a good manager was, and that kind of stuff. So I did follow my gut, I think, and I'd say that was probably the most challenging part, is like just hoping that you're doing a good job in that sense. So I think like I still really loved, I taught quite a lot of sixth form at the time, so I still really liked keeping my foot in teaching. Like I think that's really important. And I think even if I was like a deputy head or even a head teacher, I would still want to do some teaching, even if it was like a lesson a week, or you had like one sixth form or year 13 class. I think I would still want to do that. But I think from a management point of view, like I went with my gut. I think I try to, have empathy and lead with like care as well. And obviously that needs to be balanced with like holding people to account. But I think leading by example, and I think organization's really key, like being organized and making sure you've got like systems in place for your team, like good routines for your team, setting up your team well, making sure they're kind of collaborative. But it was interesting because obviously you also get a bit of a bigger picture of how the school runs, and you start working with different people from across the school. So it was really fun. And actually, I think sixth form's the best place to be. Controversial maybe. You get to do so many exciting things. They're transitioning from GCSE to sixth form. where typically they get a bit more freedom. They're kind of making that transition into like leaving school, moving to university, or moving into some other form of training or education. So it's a very exciting place to be, but it is very busy and there's no real downtime, I'd say, throughout the year. Yeah. So I think that's a summary.
No,
yeah.
that's really insightful. Thank you, Ben. Really, really insightful. I think it's something we've actually not covered much on the podcast, and I think actually maybe going forward, I think talking about leadership and the transition from teacher to maybe middle leadership is a discussion maybe we could go into detail on another episode, because it's, especially when you're working with second year ECTs and Teach First trainees, I know it's something that's always sort of on their mind of, okay, what's my next step? And really the next step is middle leadership or having a TLR or etc. And it's how do you make that move? And actually, I think you're quite right. There isn't that much training on how to be a leader, and you often sort of you learn on the job and work out. Because leading children, as we do because we're teachers, is very different to leading the adults in the school.
Yeah.
And actually learning on the job how to do that is a whole thing in itself. And I don't know, did you do an MPQ at all before you became a leader?
No, I didn't. No, I wish I had. I think they were kind of starting to like gain a bit of traction and stuff then, but no. Have you done one? I think you have.
Yeah, so I did
the LTD.
MPQML, so a National Professional Qualification for Middle Leadership.
Okay, you did ML.
So I did that, but again, I'd already got a TLR before I'd done that. So again, I was having to lead before I'd had that training, and I think as much as obviously doing an MPQ is more work, and we already do a lot of work.
Yeah.
It is a beneficial course, and I know Teach First do MPQs now, don't they? They offer MPQs.
Definitely. And actually, I think that's probably, if I could go back, that's probably what I would do again, and maybe that would make it more manageable.
Yeah.
And I think I would also say, if people who are listening are like going into teaching or maybe like 1 or 2 years in, I think like lots of people are super ambitious and that's great, but genuinely there's no rush. I think schools can pressure you sometimes into taking those, and that's great. Well, that can be okay. I wouldn't say it's great. There's not necessarily a rush to like go into leadership. Like I'd say, definitely try and do like your ECT years and get through 3 years and really focus on making your classroom teaching really solid, because I think as soon as you go into leadership, you have less time to focus on your teaching.
Yeah.
And then if you're not where you want to be with that, you're then stuck in this middle ground and you're focusing on both the leadership and the teaching still. So yeah, my advice is definitely don't rush into it. If you can, put it off, and maybe stuff like the MPQs and everything are a great way forward, I think.
Absolutely. I think that's some really solid advice there, and I think hopefully we've got some ECTs and trainees listening who obviously want to climb the ladder, but absolutely take your time. There is no rush, and just keep progressing the way you are and absolutely access those MPQs. Okay, so I'm going to move on to sort of your current role now. So you are currently working as a program delivery manager at Teach First. What does that role entail? How does it differ from being in front of the kids at school or being a leader in school? What are the differences, and what does your role look like?
Yes, so it's one of those roles, isn't it, that like you introduce yourself as a program delivery manager and everyone's like, what is that? What does that mean?
Unless you're a Teach First ambassador, everyone's like, what?
Yeah, exactly. Like, I know what you do. Whereas a teacher, everyone knows what they do. But no, so I mean, I started as a development lead at Teach First. So that is effectively, you are on the training program, which is like the kind of initial program that Teach First run. We'd also run stuff like with leadership and ECTs, but you are training new teachers and then you're assessing them for QTS. You're also working with mentors and schools really closely to make sure that the mentors are developing and the school environments are as good places to learn to teach as possible. So that's like the development lead role. I would say even that role was very different to being a teacher. Like, you're not on the front line. You are a step back. It's great if obviously you're working with adults rather than kids. It's great if you love mentoring and coaching and really like developing people. Like, it's really good fun and it's really rewarding. I guess what you don't have is you're not working with children, really. You are in schools, so you have got that little like foot in the door, and you go and visit schools frequently, which is great. But also you're not part of like a school community. So I think that's also a good reflection, is that like, you go into a school and you are the person visiting the school and you build relationships, which is lovely as well. But yeah, you don't necessarily have that school community feel, which I think is like such a positive and such a plus of being in a school. Like, I always say that like schools around Christmas time or like around festivals times are like the best, because they're always celebrating. Everyone's kind of like, yeah,
It's so beautiful
excited.
and community and wholesome, isn't it?
It is. I know, it's so nice. Yeah, and like the development lead role is great. Like, caveat that it's great. It's more flexible than being in school, but you are a bit more of a kind of lone wolf, going around schools and stuff. So that was pretty different. And then my role now is probably a step further back than that again. So I'm not necessarily working on the whole with trainees on a day-to-day basis like I would be as a development lead. So my role now is kind of threefold. So I manage a team of development leads, and obviously each of those development leads has a portfolio of trainees that they look after. I have kind of, I guess, oversight over maybe 150, 200 trainees.
Wow.
That's one part of the role. Another part is supporting development leads and other support roles with maybe like complex trainee issues.
Yeah.
There might be personal issues. There might be, anything from, they're struggling on the program to, progress issues, anything like that. And then we also are involved in a particular area of the charity's work. So you might be involved in, leading summer institute. You might be involved in like trying to improve the provision for mentors in schools. So that work is really interesting as well. So yeah, very different. It is very different. I feel less like a teacher, much less like a teacher now than I did as a development lead.
It sounds so
But it's great.
interesting though, and I think even from a selfish point of view, I'm really interested to hear sort of how the roles work within Teach First, because obviously as a trainee you just sort of accept that you've got this development lead and they're fantastic. It's nice to hear about the background of it, and your job sort of being that threefold is huge, but really interesting. And it's, so you said about obviously you manage your team of development leads and then they obviously look after their trainees, but really interesting to hear about the fact that there is that process. So if your development leads are having, or your development leads trainees are having issues, whether that be personal or struggling with the program, again, I think it emphasizes how important those structures of support are. And it's something I've always said, and I will always back up. Teach First, and I've seen from when I was on the program and my colleagues that were in the same place as me when they were struggling, like Teach First support was fantastic. If anyone had a personal issue, you knew you'd go to your development lead, and you knew they'd take it wherever they needed to take it, which apparently is you, and the support would be there. So it's really interesting to hear about. And then I love the fact that I actually think people forget that Teach First is a charity, and actually the huge amounts of work that goes on in the background to make the spectacular Summer Institute, the huge events that you put on, and the support that you offer not only to the trainees but sort of everyone around, that is really, really big. So thank you for the insight. Found that really, really
No
interesting.
worries. If you've got any more questions, let me know.
I'm sure I'll think of loads, and then I'll have to get you back on so I can keep asking.
Yeah. We'll do a Teach First special.
Definitely. So moving on then, in your current role, obviously you look after the development leads, and the development leads look after the trainees. But what do you think are the most important qualities that a new teacher should focus on developing?
I wonder if I should think of mine and then you should think of yours and we'll compare them.
Yes. Okay.
Not to put you on the spot or anything.
No, absolutely. I love this. This is exciting.
So, okay, actually, let's put some wait time in there, and I'll give you
Love this
Quote Doug
pedagogical
Lemov.
techniques coming out. So you've got some thinking time.
You got some think time. We'll work the clock.
No hands up.
Doug Lemov would be proud, wouldn't he?
So interestingly, I got given some advice, and I couldn't even tell you who. No, I can. It was another Teach First ambassador, actually.
Oh yeah.
But it was when I was a trainee, and they were, I think, maybe just finished their second year of Teach First. So we're talking quite a long time ago. But they said to me, and I think I was walking into one of my first lessons, they said, this week, all I want you to do is get the first 5 minutes right.
Yes. Yeah.
And I was like, that's really good advice. And she was like, the reason I've given you that piece of advice is because if you get the first 5 minutes right, you're setting the culture in your classroom. And
Couldn't
you are
agree more,
setting
yeah.
what those expectations are. So for me, when you first become a teacher, I think that you should really hammer down on what your expectations are in your classroom and what you would like your culture to be in your classroom. And I genuinely, no word of a lie, still use the exact same script as I wrote on that first time I became a teacher. And I say it to my trainees now. I say, I'd rather you didn't teach anything in this first hour or these lessons until the culture is correct in your classroom. Because if it takes you a week to get the culture where you need it to be and they know where the line is, you're going to have 35 weeks of really good learning. You don't get the culture
make that
right
time
now
back easily.
You're just going to be constantly pulling and pulling and pulling, and they're constantly going to be pushing, and learning then doesn't happen. So for me, culture and expectations.
Yeah. Funny you say that, because we had school-centered learning a couple of weeks ago, which, for those that don't know, is like a week in school where trainees get to like practice being a teacher in a school that they're not going to be teaching in. It's great. And one of the pieces of advice I gave was exactly that. I said, just script your entry routine. Like, you need to think about, just don't worry about anything else. That's so important. Where are you going to be standing? What are you going to be doing first? Where are you going to go next? What are you going to say next? So yeah, couldn't agree more.
Absolutely.
I think, well, certainly one of mine, I know this sounds obvious maybe, but is having like a caring person, like showing you care.
Yeah.
And showing kindness and empathy to pupils. I think going into teaching, you've got to want to work with children. And it sounds really obvious, but it's so important. And yeah, if I think some people go in and they think, actually, they hear things like "don't smile until Christmas," and like, you've got to be super strict, and like, you can be strict without being mean, and that's really hard to get. But that's definitely like a conversation or a thing you need to think about, is like, how am I going to be strict without being mean? And the way to do that is just be consistent and be firm, stick to your school's behaviour policy, but at the same time, like, smile and ask the kids how they are and take an interest in them. So I think caring and being kind is definitely up there with one of the main qualities.
I think really we've hit on the same points there. I think first 5 minutes and being caring and kind and setting the boundaries, but in a nice way. And that again all comes down to the culture in your classroom. They know that they're going to turn up, and on the threshold you're going to say, "Good morning, how are you? You look a little bit sad today. What's the matter? You're a bit hyper. Do you want 5 minutes outside before," well, not 5 minutes, but would you like to stand outside and let everyone else go in before you go in? And then just by providing that quick, I can see you, I can see your mood's changed, they instantly go, "Oh, this person cares about me." So actually, when you set the expectation inside the classroom, they're a lot more receptive to it.
And you build relationships that way, don't you? Exactly, yeah. I think two others that I would shout out are sense of humour. I think that's really important. And again, that's really hard because, someone will tell you that you need to be strict and you need to, like, stick to the behaviour policy. And like, yes, you do need to do those things. but that doesn't mean you can't have a sense of humor and have fun with the pupils. And I think, again, it's about, so much of it is about building relationships, isn't it, and rapport. So I think sense of humor would be my other one, and then maybe a third one, and this, again, I think is obvious, but maybe something that people wouldn't think of, is just like intelligence. And that's kind of, I guess, like, that's why, Teach First has, set criteria, and, you need to get a 2-1 in your degree and things like that, but also like emotional intelligence and common sense,
100%.
I think. So yeah, an organisation, try and work on your organisation if you're not an organised person. It does help.
Yes, it does. It helps a lot. A lot. Especially when you're a second year or a first year Teach First and you're trying to deal with the ECT programs, the Teach First programs, all of your kids, and progressing and doing extracurricular stuff. So yeah, definitely organisation is a big one.
100%.
Okay, well, brilliant. Thank you so much for everything you have shared. It has been beyond fascinating, and I could talk to you for hours about teaching and Teach First and everything surrounding it. But obviously we have been talking for a while. So we are just going to close our podcast now. But lastly, as I'm sure you're aware, we do a research bite at the end of every episode. So please, could you share with our listeners what your research bite is for this week?
Yes, mine would be something I've only come across like fairly recently, actually, but it's called adaptive instructional coaching. So it's probably not necessarily one for brand new teachers, but perhaps mentors or people who are involved in like coaching trainees. So it's, I think, kind of, led on, the person who I heard it from was somebody called Hailey Hughes, who is the director of education at Iris Connect, which lots of people will be familiar with. And she's also a senior lecturer at the University of Sunderland. And it's all about how to make instructional coaching, that is in the form of like training teachers, most effective, and training them to be able to adapt to different situations rather than just teaching them to remember a certain routine or a certain rule, or maybe like my routine, but that might not necessarily be right for them. And she did a really, really interesting talk that I went to recently. I think there's a video of a very similar talk, if not the same talk, on YouTube, so I can share the link with you and you can pass it on.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll put that in the show notes.
Yeah, but it was, really interesting. Lots of like current kind of research and stuff on instructional coaching and mentoring there.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. Really, I cannot thank you enough, Ben, for your time today.
Thank you.
And I'm sure we'll talk again soon. Lastly, thank you very much to all of our listeners for tuning in again. As always, we will look forward to having you listen in a future week. And please make sure you do follow us on Spotify, Amazon, or YouTube. Thanks again, Ben, and thank you to our listeners.
Thank you.